Good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news, a war zone. Those are the words that are being used to describe the deadly mass shooting that happened late today in a newsroom in Annapolis, Maryland. We are awaiting a press conference. Here is what we know right now as we await that, and we are going to bring it to you live. So many details to learn tonight. We know 5 people are dead. Several others injured, and we just know some of the chilling details about the attack here just coming into CNN. Witnesses say the gunman shot through a glass door. It happened at about 2:30 this afternoon and then started shooting in the newsroom.
I saw a guy holding a gun. The door of the Capitol Gazette had been blown to pieces. It was in shattered pieces all on the carpet. And this guy was holding what looked like a big shotgun and moving across the entrance of the Capitol Gazette office, pointing the gun deeper into the office, like he was targeting people. And now another witness, Phil Davis, who's a crime reporter for the newspaper, the Capitol Gazette, who was inside the newsroom, is saying there's, quote, nothing more terrifying than hearing multiple people get shot while you're under your desk and then hearing the gunman reload. Now, police were on the scene within 90 seconds. Saving countless lives.
What was the address? 888 State Road, Suite 104. The person still shooting.
We got about 4 bodies inside.
He's inside the Gazette office, the main office where all the victims were. We got him.
According to one official, the suspected gunman was found hiding under a desk, taken into custody. Police say they recovered what they thought may have been an explosive device as well. The chilling story here as we desperately try to understand a motive. And as I said, press conference, we are waiting for that. The moment that comes, we're going to bring it to you live. As we await, I want to go to Shimon Prokupecz, who is out front live in Annapolis. And Shimon, what are you learning from your sources tonight?
Yeah, Erin, really behind us right now at this moment, a crime scene, police working through that scene, really trying to determine any kind of motive, what caused this man to open fire inside this newsroom. Still a big question here for investigators who say the suspect, who they finally, we believe, learned his name, is not cooperating with them, though they are questioning him. They say he is not cooperating, and as you said, he walked in here, opened fired, using a shotgun, we're told, killing 5 people. 3 other people have been injured. They are at a hospital here, and they are expected to survive. But really, Erin, when you think about it, you know, the real question for investigators here, now that they have this suspect in custody, is who is he? Why did he do this? And really trying to see if this was motivated by someone who was angry at the newspaper for something that was published, something that was written, or was this something else? And that's still the big question and the big mystery here tonight, Erin.
All right. Thank you very much, Shimon. And as we say, you know, didn't seem to have an ID on him. At least that's what we had originally heard, and was not cooperative. Evan Perez is out front live in Washington. And Evan, you are learning as everything we now know about this individual. What is that?
Well, Erin, one of the things that police had trouble with was the fact that he didn't have identification. He was not being cooperative, would not tell them who he was. It appears that they used other means to identify who he is. One of the first things they did is they put his fingers through a reading machine, a fingerprint reading machine that they have on the scene, the FBI agents that were on the scene helping the Anne Arundel County Police. And it came back with no fingerprints. They came back with no hits. And so the question became, well, why is that? We're told that it appears that his fingerprints were altered in some way. Perhaps he filed them off. Perhaps he put something on them so that when he was arrested, when he was taken into custody, police were not able to use his fingerprints to be able to identify him. So that's one of the troubles that police had. But it appears that they have now been able to bridge that gap. They've now figured out a way to identify him, perhaps through his face. They have facial recognition technology. Yeah. They can use that to match it against databases, state databases. So they do know who it is. At this point, they're not saying whether he has provided any information. They have not determined what exactly brought him to this newspaper today, whether he had a beef with the newspaper, whether he knew anyone there whatsoever. We have no idea what brought him there today. now.
And pretty incredible when you say his fingerprints were altered. It's an unusual thing, Evan, to hear. It stands out, certainly, just hearing you report that. But I do know from the dispatch video, which we're going to hear more of, I guess we do know it's a he. We know he's white. We know some descriptors about him, but that's
Right.
it.
Right. We know he's a male. He was described, at least by the police there, as white. I'm told that perhaps that might not be the case. He might be Hispanic, perhaps. So that's again some information that authorities are still looking at as far as this investigation. This is still very early on, but we know, Aaron, that at the minimum they've got 5 charges of murder that they can bring against him. And so if he doesn't cooperate, we can expect that they're going to book him and perhaps bring him before a judge, perhaps even tonight or tomorrow, early tomorrow in Annapolis there.
All right, thank you very much, Evan. And I want to go out front now to... We're back with our breaking news. A deadly newsroom shooting, 5 people killed, at least 3 more injured. The offices were of the Capital Gazette newspaper in Annapolis, Maryland. And a lot more details coming in as we await this press conference coming up momentarily. A law enforcement source telling us the suspect who is in custody is refusing to cooperate. You heard the mayor just saying his understanding is that's still the case. Officials were not able to identify him through his fingerprints because they appear to have been altered. But they are confirming now that they were able to ID him using facial recognition software, which could be very significant. We do not yet know his name. They have not released that. Out front tonight, Caitlin Collins at the White House. And Caitlin, of course, the president has been briefed. The press secretary has spoken out.
She has, Aaron, and she's probably issued the strongest statement that we've gotten from the White House. This is someone who interacts with reporters on a near daily basis. She said that she strongly condemns the act of senseless violence in Maryland tonight. She said a violent attack on innocent journalists doing their job is an attack on every American. And she said that her prayers are with the victims and the families. Now, President Trump was not at the White House during the time of this shooting, about an hour away outside of Annapolis, but he was in Wisconsin traveling back. He tweeted that he had been briefed on the shooting pretty quickly, and then later, when he returned to the White House, reporters were on the South Lawn asking him questions that were clearly audible of response to this shooting. He declined to answer those questions. He continued on. You can see him there. He walked on to the Oval Office, but he did tweet about the shooting earlier today, saying that he'd been briefed on it. He said his thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families, and he thanked the first responders. Now, of course, no motive has been determined in this shooting yet, but during a flight back from Wisconsin, one of the press secretaries who was on board with the president, Aaron, was asked about the president's rhetoric on the media and if they thought that there was some chance that had anything to do with this. This Deputy Press Secretary, Lindsay Walters, said that the White House condemns violence. There's no room for that. She said violence is never tolerated in any form, no matter who it is against. Aaron.
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. I want to go now to Phil Mudd, former CIA counterterror official, Jonathan Wackrow, law enforcement analyst, Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security, and Brian Stelter, senior media correspondent and, of course, host of Our Reliable Sources. Jonathan, let me just start with you. A lot of news here just coming in. Fingerprints altered. They were able to ID through facial recognition software.
It's amazing. The first time that I've heard of a positive identification being made out of with facial recognition software. I mean, I think this is a game changer for law enforcement, being able to quickly identify who this individual is from that new technology.
What do you make, Phil, of the fact that the fingerprints were altered?
I don't make much yet. In these situations, there's a big difference between what we think and what we know. Somebody might look at this and think, because the fingerprints were altered, this must indicate that he had prepared for this in advance. My first reaction is, hold on a second here. Yeah. What if he was involved in a job or a hobby where he's handling corrosive materials that affected his fingerprints? Yeah. What if they're using a mobile device for fingerprints that's not quite as effective as a device you can get when you really have them in custody? So I'm looking at this saying, let's rush this one. Let's see what we got here. It's
interesting, though, Juliette, Phil's point, of course, is well taken, yet at the same time, he didn't have an ID on him. He's not cooperating, and at this time, we understand from the mayor of Annapolis, he is still not cooperating.
That's right. So the fingerprints in and of themselves might say a number of theories, but just in the totality of circumstances, not simply he didn't have identification. He clearly knew weaponry pretty well from what we've heard so far. The fingerprints being mutilated or in some way not clean and clear for fingerprint test, as well as, let's just add on the explosive device. So the combination of all of these things then would make one believe, okay, this is someone who had planned it, had maybe done things to himself, maybe would have thought that he was going to be killed during it, so that it would be harder to ID. And so that's where, that's why all of us on the panel also wait, because we're going to get a lot more intelligence about what the motive might have been. But there's a lot of data points to suggest that this was someone who was going to go in, kill, didn't want to be identified, and probably thought he would be killed.
And had a plan. Of course, you heard the mayor there, Jonathan, say that, of course, he, along with everyone in this country, hopes that there is no political motive here, and we don't yet know any motive. But what we do know is that he did have some sort of he had that bag. You heard the mayor say it was a bag, and that they thought it was an explosive device, and what was in it was gas cans. When you hear that, you think what?
Listen, we clearly know that he showed up with the intent to kill. It was either going to be utilizing the shotgun, and if that failed, he had a secondary device that he could utilize. So, finding out what his motive is and why he showed up there. Listen, rational people don't just wake up in the morning, grab a shotgun and gas cans and rush into to a location without a very specific motive. I think what we're going to see through the investigative process is that either the newspaper or somebody there. He was being targeted. A lot of times, almost over 50% of the times in these, active shooter situations, it's some sort of grievance. Now, it could be a grievance against the newspaper, against a journalist. This could be a domestic dispute that, carried over. There's a lot of things right now. We're in the infancy of the investigation.
And Brian, one thing we do know is the dispatch. We have some of the audio of what happened here. And of course, as we've said, you heard 60 to 90 seconds before they were able to get in there. Obviously, that saved lives. And about 22 minutes into the attack, they started describing the suspect. And here's what we heard on the tape, Brian.
Do we have any kind of intel on our shooter? My own was a ponytail. Do we have a clothing description? No clothing description.
And that's what we get, Brian. I mean, you've been talking to people who were in that newsroom, in that scene of fear and carnage. What are they telling you?
Yes, some staffers at the paper who, believe it or not, they're actually going to produce a paper tonight. The paper will come out as scheduled tomorrow morning. We can share a couple of posts from these reporters who are sharing this on Twitter. Reporter Chase Cook saying, "I can tell you this, we are putting out a damn paper tomorrow." And here's an emotional message from a photographer named Paul Gillespie describing what it was like inside the newsroom. He was there at the headquarters. He says, "I'm okay physically so far, but I'm mentally a mess. I was inside. I'm lucky to be alive. Please pray for my coworkers who were not as lucky as I was." He says, "We lost some truly great people today. I am in shock trying to process this horrible situation." Aaron, we don't know for sure if the 5 fatalities were all journalists. What we do know is that would make this the most deadly day for journalists in America since 9/11. You think back to 2015, 2 journalists were gunned down on live TV, TV station in Roanoke, Virginia, WDBJ. Now, in that case, that was a disgruntled ex-employee who carried out that attack on live TV. There were also issues about mental health in that case. So I don't think we can rule out the possibility of an ex-employee, a disgruntled guy who went to this office today. But it is notable that so far, none of the staffers have said they recognized him.
And Phil, I think that's significant, right? Because when you hear from the dispatch, right, white male with a ponytail, the implication is that he was not hiding who he was physically, obviously from an ID perspective, and who knows from the fingerprints they were. But they aren't all saying, "Oh, we knew this person." And nobody is saying that.
And nothing is suggesting, or a lot of this isn't suggesting they went in there with a sophisticated plan for how to execute this, including whether to put a baseball cap on, whether to wear a hoodie. You look at some characteristics. He didn't case the place well enough to realize, how can I get in without shooting up the door? He didn't go in saying,
because he shot through the glass door to the newsroom before he went in.
Let's cut to the chase here. He didn't bring a weapon, and like the weapons we saw at the Pulse shooting, like the weapon we saw in Las Vegas. He didn't sit there and say, how do I confront law enforcement when they walk in? It looks like if it was an explosive device, it was pretty rudimentary, and clearly it didn't work. He didn't sit there and say, how do I exit once law enforcement gets in here? a lot of this is looking, including the fact that he wasn't sort of trying to protect himself, for example, from surveillance cameras or people in the building, like somebody who did not have a sophisticated plot. I'm not saying he didn't think about it for a while, but he didn't think through a lot of this very clearly.
How long, Jonathan, until you think we know the motive?
Listen, we may not know the motive. He's not speaking. And, I think that, there's reporting and everyone's saying, like, oh my God, he's not cooperating with police. Well, why would he? He just killed 5 people. This isn't a rational person. He's not going to just sit there with law enforcement and just spill his guts. So law enforcement's going to have to take this very methodically to look at everything in this individual's life. Once they positively identify him, they need to start looking at his entire network, his relationships, where he lives. That's going to take some time, absent of him, divulging his motive.
Right. And Juliet, obviously, motive crucial in the specifics of this case, and also for the whole country now to understand, as you put here, Brian put the context on it, right? The most deadly day for journalists since 9/11.
That's right. Yeah, and this is, look, this is the challenge of those of us here on the panel. You don't want to make this bigger than it is, but you also don't want to deny reality, right? So this is how the gun debate often unfolds. You want to focus on the victims, but there is a bigger issue here. Today, we may have the same. Look, there's only 2 potential motives. One is a quite personal one, and like Brian, I completely agree. The fact that none of the witnesses knew who he was suggests then a second theory, which was this was done for some other reason, whether it's against reporters or maybe they wrote a story about him. Who knows at this stage? But I don't think it's inappropriate at this stage to at least raise the issue that, or at least put out there, as we do with the gun debate, that the tone towards journalists may be a motive here. I don't think I'm being political. I think it is important to say that the antagonism towards journalists. Yeah, it's just, and so that is part of the theory of the case in the same way that we do this with the gun debate. And we'll find out whether it was the personal or the more political. But right now, it does not look like it was the personal.
Right. And of course, Brian, I mean, I think just to be honest, look, thanks to Sarah Sanders for coming out with the tweet the way she did. That's a good thing. Yeah. But the facts are also the facts. Who knows what the motive is here? But the tone from this administration towards reporters of disdain and disgust and disrespect is just the way things are now, right? We have, people accosting our Jim Acosta at Trump rallies. That is not coming from nowhere.
The reality for journalists in America today, especially journalists covering politics, is that you're going to get threats. You're going to get threats usually electronically, via email or phone, sometimes full-blown death threats, in other cases more generic messages. We've also seen a sharp rise in actual physical assaults against journalists. Now, these do not happen every day, but they happen too often, and they're happening more than they did 5 years ago. So some of the rhetoric is related to reality on the ground. Now, thank God we don't see journalists being gunned down in the streets of America. Except that today we did see that, and we need to know more about why it happened. It is haunting and chilling to think that some of the killings of journalists we see in other countries could be coming home here. We all remember Charlie Hebdo in Paris. There was even a bombing in Kabul just a few weeks ago, 10 local journalists killed there. Those stories usually feel very far away, and journalists here in this country are incredibly lucky and have an incredible amount of freedom to do our work safely. But today, that does not appear to be the case in Annapolis.
All right. Thank you all very much.